All right, so here we are in our weekly meeting, and today we are talking about law. And law is something that, as yoga teachers, as wellness professionals, we forget about the importance of having all the boxes checked, everything under under the law. And for that, I have today my guest today. I'm super thrilled to have Cory Sterling, who is joining us from Canada. And Cory is the founder of Conscious Counsel, which is a company, it's a law company that has specified, it's a specific helping yoga, wellness professionals, and creative people to have everything, let's say, safe and protected under the law, and not to get overwhelmed by all of those things that, of course, every time we we think about the law and thinking about being protected, we just feel so overwhelmed. If you're watching the live, please let us know, give us a hashtag live, and leave any questions that you might have during today's live. If you're watching the video, if you're watching the replay, please leave us a hashtag replay so that we know, that I know that you've been interacting with this content. And without further ado, here is Cory. Thank you so much for joining us, Cory. How are you today?
Thank you, Manu. I'm very happy to be speaking with you. And yeah, I'm doing wonderful today. I'm doing great. I've done this for years. I've been a yoga lawyer for 5 years. I've built a whole business around working with yoga professionals. And this is the first time that I get to work with a bilingual community. And yeah, and specifically, I know it's a lot of people from Spain and from Latin America. So I'm celebrating. This is my coffee cup. This is Juan Valdez from Colombia. And I'm excited to talk about, the most important things yoga professionals need to know about the law. But the first, I just want to say that, I was born in Canada. My parents are Canadian, but I'm really a Latino at heart. I've been living in Brazil the past 3 years. I've lived in Argentina. I've been all over South America, and I feel something special. In Portuguese, we say borogodo, which is like that special connection. So I'm so happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to share information.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to have you here today. Yes, in fact, before we met, I don't know why, but I had the idea that you had like some kind of Latin connection, some Latin root. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how it came. My family's all Eastern European, but when I'm there, I feel right. So that's what matters most.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump into the first question. I've been asking some questions to my community, and I have a question from one of the people in my community. Some of them had basically the same questions that I'm going to share with you today. So the first one would be, what are the basic legal requirements for an independent yoga teacher?
That's a perfect question. I wish I know who asked it and where they were from, but I'm going to dive into that. But also, Manu, I provided to you a link to a free legal yoga checklist.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind just to post that and share that, that would be awesome. And the reason why we came up with this checklist is because we see that constantly this is a classic question. And very often what we'll get yoga teachers saying is, I don't even know where to start, and I don't know exactly what to begin with. So, I don't know what I don't know. So if you want, there's a copy of the checklist. You can download it. That's sort of like the roadmap that you're going to have to understand the different areas of law that you should be aware of, and what to look out for in each relationship. So the basic legal requirements as an independent yoga teacher, the key relationships that you want to think about for legal requirements is that who do you work with, and how can you limit your liability as best as possible? So the way that I always explain the law to yoga professionals and yoga teachers is just basically by saying, look at the different relationships you have in your business, and within each of those relationships, can you communicate your expectations openly and honestly as best as possible? So if we're looking at an independent yoga teacher, the different type of relationships you're going to have, you probably are working for a studio. So what does that relationship with the studio look like? Are you a contractor? Are you an employee? Have you signed an agreement? Are you recording content, evergreen content and videos online? And understanding the context for that relationship and making sure that the relationship works for you. One thing that I've learned in working with yoga professionals all over the world, and this is sort of like a human being characteristic trait in relationships, is that the problems usually come up when something has not been discussed or communicated. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you're working at a studio, or you're working with one of your clients, and there's something that comes up and sort of bothers you that you haven't addressed. Maybe it has to do with the payments. Maybe it has to do with the way that photos of you are being used. Maybe if they're trying to get you to teach your services in a particular way. Whatever it is, you want legal agreements to communicate all of the expectations you have in working with someone, because that's really the best way to ensure that you have a healthy relationship and that you have a relationship that serves you. So the general umbrella principle to understand is, okay, what are the different relationships that I have, and how can I make sure that I am communicating openly and honestly in this relationship to protect my business interests, to protect my intellectual property, and to make sure that I'm not getting sued. And I think that sort of is just a nice avenue to actually provide the answer of what the question is. The basic legal requirements are making sure you have documentation in place to protect yourself in the event that someone gets injured. The document used for that is a waiver of liability. Another requirement is making sure that if you're working with someone or for someone, that you're clear on the boundaries of that relationship. What is being asked of you, that you're able to deliver it. And the other considerations you may have is, if you are developing teaching materials for someone else, for a teacher training, or you're providing a workshop or doing a retreat, have you communicated your expectations in that particular relationship as clearly as you can? So it's not one sentence, but it's more of a holistic approach of looking at the different relationships that you have, understanding maybe what some of the legal nuances are to each of those relationships, and then finding a way to communicate openly and honestly so that you're comfortable and you feel value and there's boundaries around those relationships.
Yeah, Cory, that's super interesting too, because of course, these are things that as professionals, as yoga teachers, we should always be aware of that. However, I think since COVID times, this is much more important than ever. Like, I think the COVID has changed the landscape, and now things are completely, like, it's a different thing, right? We should be more aware of these kind of things.
Yeah, you need, because the way that the industry has changed and the way that we provide our services have changed, and the business models for the businesses that we work for have changed, the legal landscape has changed as well. So as an example, the way that you work with your clients one-on-one is very different today than it was 2 years ago. And so what I always tell clients is, your legal agreements should be reflective of the type of relationships that you have today, not of what things used to be like, or copying someone else's agreement and using it, but what is the ideal relationship I want to have with my clients today? When am I going to see them in person? What am I going to specifically be doing for them? What are cancellation policies have changed. The rules around receiving an auto-pay subscription have changed everywhere. So there are new specifics around the type of relationships that you want to make sure that you address, because remember, this is all about being proactive. Like, law is a scary word, and a lot of us, when we think about law and lawyers, we think about famous movies or television dramas or things like that. But really, if you're a small business owner with an eye to grow your business, to professionalize your business, to use this business to continue to support your life and to build a community, you have to work with a lawyer who understands small business and can put you in a position to succeed. It's the same as working with an accountant. Like, working with an accountant is not that fun, but it's something that if you want to have a proper business and you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position to succeed, you have to work with professionals. And law is just starting to catch up in the yoga industry, to make sure that yoga professionals who are using their businesses to grow and support and nurture and professionalize, making sure that they're properly protected because things have changed so much.
Yeah, I was thinking, when we were talking about, you were talking about before, to know what is the nature of the relationship for an independent yoga teacher with the studio. When I was telling you, like, I feel like the landscape has changed so much with COVID, it's because that made me think, because you were talking about, what are the boundaries when you record content for a studio. So you are working for someone else, or you have a relationship with someone else with a studio, you record the content, but then how many times this person is going to be able to use that content to grow their business and to earn income with that content. So I think, yeah, it's super important that all of those things are super clear at the beginning of their relationship, just to make things like work better.
Yeah. And what's interesting, Manu, is that as a lawyer, I work with both studio owners and I work with independent teachers. So I've drafted agreements on both sides of it. So I really understand what each party's looking for. And I think the most important thing for all of this is that before you provide services for someone, you understand exactly what you're getting into, and that you're comfortable with the scope of the services and the arrangement that you've made. So, for example, the thing about intellectual property laws that a lot of independent teachers don't know is that if someone records a video of you and you're a contractor and not an employee, you retain ownership into those materials. So if a studio records, a 60-minute vinyasa flow of maybe either you're doing it from home or you're doing it in the studio, and then they go on and they sell that for a period of 3 years. And let's say they sell that class for $7, and over 3 years, they sell it 300 times. Unless agreed otherwise, you're entitled to 50% of the revenues from that. But a lot of teachers aren't aware of that or don't turn their mind to that. Whereas if you're an employee, the general rule would be, okay, as an employee, we paid you a salary as working exclusively for our company. And as such, we paid you $50 to record it, but we own all of the materials and we can do whatever we want with it. So it manifests in a lot of different ways, but it's an example of a current problem that a lot of people are going through, and a lot of people just aren't aware of what their rights are. Right.
Most of the people in this community, most of the yoga teachers who are watching this video, this live today, they're independent yoga teachers, but we do have also some studio owners in this community, Marketing for Yoga Teachers. And my next question for you would be, what are the basic legal requirements for yoga studios, since you are crafting this contract for both independent yoga teachers and studio? Is there anything that our yoga studio owners need to know about the law?
Yeah, the big things for a studio owner, assuming that when we say studio, we mean a physical space. One thing that will be relevant will be signing of a lease and understanding the implications of signing a lease, what terms may be included in that particular agreement. And leases are a really, really important document, because it's usually it's a longer term, big financial commitment. So in 2020, probably the first 18 months of the pandemic, all of my clients who were going out of business were ones who had big leases. So you just want to be aware of the legal requirements within a lease before you sign it. And again, just make sure that you're comfortable with what's being asked of you. Also, as a studio, the other things that you want to consider are how the landscape of recurring revenue for the recurring revenue model and what legal requirements are relevant. I have a lot of studios who are on recurring revenue on their membership agreements, but they're not drafted properly and they have problem with cancellations, or clients wanting to get out of an annual contract, trying to find loopholes. If the agreement's not properly drafted for you, it can't really protect you. And then obviously liability and waivers are really important as a studio owner, but also much more so for a studio owner, the classification of workers, whether it's employees or contractors, can be really, really dangerous, and can be a very, very expensive mistake to have made. And the typical mistake will be a studio opening, wanting to just have contractors because it's cheaper, and then getting audited or receiving a complaint from a teacher, the teacher saying, hey, well, you're really treating me like an employee, even though you call me a contractor. Then the teacher wants unemployment benefits. This is very, very common through COVID. The studio will not give it to them, alleging they're a contractor, and then the business gets reported by the teacher. So as a studio, you have to be very, very careful about the different relationships that you have, making sure you're working with people that you're comfortable with, and making sure that, if you have contractors at law, you actually have to treat them like contractors instead of just calling them whatever it is that you want.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And Cory, since this community, it's international community, we are bilingual community, so we have people from different parts of the world. So my next question for you would be, is the law regarding yoga and the wellness industry similar or the same in different parts of the world? How does that work?
Well, what I can tell you, Manu, is that firstly, I can tell you with certainty that wellness is very, very different in different jurisdictions and countries. And the reason why is because wellness operators and healers are often working in an unregulated industry that exists within regulated industries, right? So if you're doing anything related to food or diet, right, there's registered dietitians, there's doctors, there's naturopaths, there's holistic nutritionists, there's all these different modalities that have popped up, which are regulated, but what the practitioners are doing, if it's Reiki, if it's healing, whatever sort of practice it is, acupuncture, a lot of the times that's not regulated. So that will be very, very much more different and much more jurisdiction specific. Yoga itself, the laws around yoga will not be different in different countries, just because it's still such a small, like in perspective of a society and a civilization and what government decides to regulate. There's no rules, like there's not the Yoga Studio Owner Act of Peru, right? Where the Peruvian government's like, okay, we need a piece of legislation outlining the rules for yoga studios. It's not happening, and it's not going to happen. That being said, obviously between different countries, basic contractual laws will be different. There will be different rules around liability. There will be different rules around contractors and employees. So it will be different. What we've learned at Conscious Counsel, and I wrote a book called the Yoga Law Book, which I can also put in a link to if anyone's interested in it. But when I wrote the book, I really wrote it for a global audience, and I've sold copies all over the world with it. And the reason why, even though there are these nuanced differences for each jurisdiction, the general principles that apply to each different type of relationship will be similar. So the laws may be slightly different, but the problems that a studio owner is going to run into, like I can tell you, they could be in Argentina, they could be, I don't know, in Australia, they could be in whatever country in the world. If you run a yoga studio, I could tell you most likely the top 5 problems that you're going to run into, or what the biggest 5 legal issues are going to be. So, and that's why what we always say is when we work with international clients, and we've got clients all over the world, we always say we draft our agreements according to best industry practices, because you're more likely to come up with a problem about the yoga industry than you are to come up with something really specific in your jurisdiction. Again, if let's say we were talking about real estate, this would be completely different. The rules in Argentina versus the rules in Venezuela about real estate are, different systems, all those things. We're talking about yoga and yoga practitioners, and also just the other observation that I've made that is continually reinforced on a day-to-day basis from my practice is that the real crux of it is getting out ahead of the problems by communicating openly and honestly. So when we get someone a package of documents, the benefit that they're getting is, okay, these agreements are based on all of the problems that, you know, the hundreds of yoga studio owners or yoga teachers before have had as a problem. Like, does that make sense? It's just addressing it from a different way instead of being like super pro law and let's go to court and let's do this. We use the agreements to try to get people to communicate around the issues that would be most likely to cause problems for them.
Which makes sense that those issues may be similar within the same industry, may be very similar, be it in Argentina, Germany, or whatever part of the world, right?
Exactly.
How, if in any way you can tell us, what is your opinion on this? How has the law landscape within the yoga industry changed since 2020? Have you seen any changes? Have you seen any difference, like anything have changed before 2020 and after 2020?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference that took place was just the sheer volume of online practice. And then seeing a lot of yoga professionals not using updated agreements and using older agreements for the new way that they practice. So as an example, a waiver of liability, the general essence of a waiver is you are facilitating yoga services or a wellness service for someone. You have a responsibility to make sure that they do not get injured by virtue of practicing with you. Now, a waiver, the general principle is that someone is allowed to say, okay, well, I'm not going to hold Manu responsible, but they're only able to do that if the document they sign accurately reflects the nature of the services provided. So just two small nuances that have changed is one, that now everyone, it's very common to do Zoom classes or online classes. And it's also very common for people to have pre-recorded materials. Now, as a lawyer, again, so I've drafted waivers of, I've defended waivers of liability, and I've attacked waivers of liability. So I've had a lot of experience with this. And if someone got injured doing a pre-recorded video and the waiver of liability did not mention anything about pre-recorded video, that is the first argument that I would come up with why the waiver of liability should not apply. I would say, okay, you're right. This, you know, they were doing yoga, but, you know, there was no instruction about, they never legally agreed to, you know, sign away their rights for, you know, making sure the safest space or being supervised, or that they wouldn't get injured if they were on a pose on their own, and anything that can be related to that. So that's sort of like a microcosm for how things have changed. Other changes that we've seen, there have been a lot of issues around trademarks. I think more than ever before, we see more with studios than with individual teachers, but people copying other businesses that they find online. Just because it used to be, I live in, let's say, where do I live? I live in La Paz in Bolivia, and I go to my local studio there, right? So before 2020, my mind was, okay, well, if I'm going to do yoga, I'm going to go to the local studio, obviously. The way things change is now it's like, oh, well, I can practice with anyone, anywhere. And so you have all of these other business owners who are looking at what other people are doing. Sometimes they find a really cool name or something that they like, and they're like, oh, cool, I'm going to take that. Whereas before, you wouldn't have that problem because the exposure, there's been a change in consumer behavior. So I would say, like, making sure making sure agreements capture the actual relationship has been a really big change, as well as like a proliferation in trademark disputes and issues, because there are more and different types of eyeballs on your brand than there were before.
That's completely true. Before 2020, I mean, if something has changed in 2020, this is something we keep talking about in this community. It's how the online part of the business was really important before 2020, but now it's like even more, because as you say, you have more people looking at your brand, more people knowing about your business.
Exactly.
We have a question from Daniela, a member of this community, and she say, and you just mentioned about the liability waivers. She say, any recommendation of what to include on a waiver?
Yeah, the big thing, Daniela, firstly, mucho gusto or prazer, depending if it's Portuguese or Spanish. The big things to include on a waiver of liability are the specifics around the activities that you do, where you do them, how you do them, equipment that you use, and then what the injuries are, how the injuries can materialize. Yeah, and then you just want to be as straightforward as possible. And Daniela, the big thing, firstly, it should be drafted by a lawyer, because in the times where I've come up against waivers that are not drafted by a lawyer, it's sort of like not having one, because you have to remember, if the document's going to come into play in the sense that, okay, there's now a legal issue and we have to, like, we're moving forward either in, you know, someone pursuing a claim or whatever happens, the document will be scrutinized. And both are going to be, you know, two sets of eyes looking at this waiver. And so if an individual who doesn't have the technical background is doing it, it may not help. But the big thing from a waiver is someone would have to clearly have been advised, like, hey, there's no ambiguity. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. These are the equipments that we're using. This is how you could get hurt. This is the outcome of what being hurt looks like. Making sure all the legal stuff is tied into that as well.
That's awesome, Cory. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you here with us today, and I'm super grateful that you came to talk to us about the law and the things that we should know as professionals. How can we find you? If some of the yoga teachers who are watching this video, they want to connect with you, how can we find you?
Manu, thank you so much for having me. And I want to do this again, if it's possible, like in a Zoom atmosphere where we could have other, you know, have people interacting live, just because, again, like, I'm so excited. I feel Latino. So for me, this feels a little bit different, which is great. I've included 2 links here in the chat. One of them is a link to the Yoga Law book. It's in-depth information on all the different topics that I've mentioned, so you can go check that out. As well, I put up a link. If anybody, having heard this, you know, would be interested in having a free consult or wanted more information or understand what it's like to work together, feel free to book a time with us, and someone from our team will be there to connect. And thank you for the opportunity to share this information. And it's really lovely to meet you, Manu.
Yeah, lovely to meet you too. And thank you for sharing those links. What I'm going to do, I'll take those links and I'll paste them in the description of this video. So whoever is watching this video, you will find those links in the description. Look for them, and yeah, so that's going to be a good way to connect with Cory. So thank you so much for being here today, and I hope you can come up again to the community, and maybe we organize that Zoom call you were talking about. I will share this with my community. If any of you who is watching want to jump into a Zoom call with Cory, please let us know, let me know, and I will do whatever is in my hands to put you guys in touch.
Perfect. And I'm also just putting my personal email address. If anybody wants to reach out and say hi from any part of the world, I'm happy to chat with you and be connected. So thank you for this, Manu, and bye, guys. Buen fin de semana y só boas coisas.
Thank you so much, Cory.
Valeu, valeu. Ciao.